across the Pacific in the United States, a furor is developing.
American teenager are offended by statements of foreign singers who strike at the very basis of our existence as God-fearing, patriotic citizens. Then we urge you to take your records, pictures, and souvenirs to the pickup points about to be named. And on the night of its appearance in Memphis,
The bond between you and me, it will be known forever. You showed me how to be free, stronger than me. You'll be known forever. I know without me or three, I hope to stay around for some time. But there's something pressure in me. I don't know how things will play out this time. The things you read in papers, where truth is merely capers with misleading headlines. A man as big as Jesus would only want to lead us to the light like a Lord. And there's something going on here, John. There's something going on here, John. There's something going on here, John. There's something going on here, John.
Shadow of a Bassman is back on the air, back on YouTube. Welcome back, Ann.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be back. It's been a long month. Missed you guys. And we have a returning guest today, Victor Forrester. He was on our last podcast, and we had to have him back because we had such a good time.
And it's Foster, Annie. Foster.
Forrester?
What'd she say? Did she put a Midwest accent on that?
Nah, she put an R in it, but that's a whole nother story because that originally was
Forster.
a family name until when they came up from England, but we won't go down that rabbit hole.
Okay,
My family
sorry.
came across the Atlantic one step ahead of the sheriff department.
Sorry,
It was-
Mr. Victor is back.
Then we've got my aunt, Kim O'Connor from
Well, thank-
Alabama.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this. This is my first podcast, so.
Well, welcome, Kim. We're honored to have you with us today. And can't wait to answer your questions. This is going to be good.
Me too.
So, Kim, how did you become a Beatle fan? Can you tell us your background there?
Well, my brother was a Beatle fan, and he was several years older than me. So in my house, I was just a toddler when he was playing Beatles albums constantly in the house. So that's how I come to love their music. So I've grown up with it, and I've been a Beatles fan my whole life.
Me too.
George is my favorite. Sorry, Paul, but George is my favorite.
Well, he's talented. I mean, I think in some ways he's underrated. You know, he
Yeah.
contributed a lot to the Beatles and their sound and everything. And, you know, they were all brothers. So
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that was part of their charm is that they all seemed so close.
you definitely see that in the performances.
Yes.
I noticed that too with their first performance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Just, you know, that you could see that bond that they had.
Yes.
It was really great. What are you laughing at?
I'm sitting here thinking about, except for the one time when Paul booed the police and John comes running over in front of him and goes, "What are you doing?"
I'd like to see that one.
Yeah, I would like to see that
You're
one.
booing the police that protect us. Anyway, sorry. That just hit me.
Oh,
I think it was Shay, I believe. So you'll have to, it was one of those concerts, but I believe it was Shay.
yeah, 65.
Yeah, you know, I bring Shea Stadium. I remember seeing a interview afterward where they weren't very happy with the police having to sneak him out in an armored car and how hot it was and everything. So it may have very well been Shea Stadium if Paul was booing the police.
Yeah, I think they were undersecured a lot of times, especially in '66. So they weren't too happy with the security people just leaving them. And as this wasn't here in the States, it was other places.
Philippines is the big example.
Philippines, exactly.
Yeah,
India, the Philippines.
yeah. And they, even in 64, they had problems with police and security then, because the police actually refused to protect them and said that they were only for protecting the crowd and the fans and stuff. So they ran into, a few problems just because they were pro-civil rights. And this happened in the southern states.
Oh, yeah.
They were
Yeah,
like refused
segregation.
accommodations. So when they got to the state, they didn't have hotels all of a sudden because,
Wow, really?
Yeah, they canceled their reservations.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then no police protection on top of that. So, they only had Mel and a few others to protect them in a crowd. So, yeah, they ran into a lot of problems with security.
And their crowds were huge, so I'm sure that was very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, thousands of people, 2,000-3,000 people just outside of your hotel room.
Right.
Yeah, I even wonder what the backstory is on the San Francisco concert, the last concert, because that's the only one where they actually had a caged fence around them.
Mhm.
There was something going on there because I also remember, and Ann, you know that, I'm sure you both know this, that John and Paul had some kind of altercation in the dressing room, which has yet to come out as to exactly what was going on. He didn't want to go out and perform. So.
I never heard anything about that.
Then they're performing it to a cage. A lot of that came out because were people outside the door that were overhearing the dispute. Let's put it.
Now, I've
let's put
heard
it that way.
stuff where on that 66 North American tour that there were a lot of death threats coming in, stuff like that they kept covered up. Knew about it down in the southern states with the Bible Belt, with the burning the records and everything, with John's "We're more popular than Jesus" comment. But I've been reading stuff that that whole 66 tour, it was bad from the get-go. I mean, nothing went right, and like I said, there were death threats everywhere they went. And
Yeah.
don't know what happened, but yeah, I would have loved to see been a fly on the wall on that one to see what they were going on about. It's just hard for me to picture John and Paul actually having a fight about anything.
Yeah. Well, I think
Yeah.
he didn't want to go out. But I mean, that was. Do you remember, Ann, exactly any of the word verbiage people were saying that happened at that event?
At that event,
Yeah, in the dressing room.
just that Paul didn't want to go on. He didn't want to perform, which is really not
Unusual for him.
Very unusual because he loved being in front of the crowd. He loved playing music. He's quite a performer. That's what I heard. He didn't want to go on. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the verbiage I know of.
I wonder if that's got anything to do with him making sure that final concert was recorded.
Yeah, it was because I guess he instructed Neil to record the concert.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, and it was behind a whole fenced in cage.
Did not know any of that.
Something was going on. Nobody's ever spoken about it. So be interesting to get to the bottom of that. But
And they knew it's going to be their last performance too.
yeah.
Could he have been worried about, and I'm going to open the door here for you, Kim, to unload on me.
Okay.
Could he have been worried about an attempt on his life with knowing something was coming, with how soon it,
Possible.
August of 66 was to November, and when it actually did happen, was he really starting to get worried that, maybe they're going to take a public shot at me rather than all these clandestine things that were happening to him, slipping the drugs in his drinks and messing with his cars. And
Yeah.
I would where did you find this information that they were messing with his cars and spiking his drinks? And
ladies, I'll let you handle that one because I've tried, and I will readily admit my knowledge does not compare to yours.
No, you're up there, Victor. You have good knowledge.
Yeah, you have good knowledge. You do. First of all, it's the Beatles anthology. George Harrison said that by 1966 they were having their drinks laced, all the time whenever they went to dinner parties, and they were getting tired of it. They were getting sick of being drugged all the time. So they ended up taking their own drinks to these dinner parties because they didn't want to get stoned. So they didn't want that happening to them. So that was my first clue in. And then I also read, I have an original copy of a magazine from, I think it was 65, where John is talking to a reporter and comes to find out this reporter, his brother was a psychiatrist and he was doing experiments with LSD. So John talked to this guy about that, the LSD experimentations that was going on. And then the reporter went over to Paul and started talking to Paul. And during that interview with Paul, John came over and warned Paul, hey, watch out for this guy. His brother is a psychiatrist and he's studying LSD experiments. So that tells me that this is something they did not want to go through. They did not want to have to experience. So those were two sources that I found.
Then you got the famous one where they got the LSD dropped in their drinks, John, George, and
that was like the first one that came out.
Yeah.
I remember hearing that one from the dentist or something.
Yeah.
Dentist.
Mhm.
But
John
I
Riley.
that I had read that
That was just the beginning.
that they were willingly, especially George, was willingly experimenting with it.
That's the narrative we find today.
But
I'm
not
sorry.
back then.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, that's the narrative we have today.
Okay.
But we use original sources from that time. We tried to find original magazines, newspaper articles, whatever we can get our hands on. And we even found, Marianne and I found a couple of original biographies from that time. So this is not what we're finding at all. They were in the early, 64, 65, 66, that time period. They did not want to get involved with drugs, except for marijuana. They did do that because it was calming to them. And, given the pressure that they were under, and there wasn't any medications or anything to help with anxiety and such, that's fine. Marijuana is marijuana.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul had anxiety. I mean, thus the nail biting.
Yeah, and John did
Fingers in the
too.
mouth, always feeling his face, that kind of, he was self-soothing, but so that's why he was such a big pot smoker.
There was I think Marianne, it might have been you that posted it maybe a month ago, or if I remember right, somebody posted on Shadow of a Bassman back in '64. If you remember those trading cards that came out, and it had their likes, don't likes on them, and all their statistics.
I actually have a couple of those.
Yeah, somebody
camera's
posted
off,
it
Victor.
for Paul, and he's here we go again.
It's okay.
Hang on a sec. Click on
All
that.
right.
And let's try this again. Back?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. It's got to be the weather. It's terrible here. Thunder and lightning. So I'm sorry.
That's
Sorry.
But he wrote on there his likes and dislikes. I remember saying that he made the comment, anything that would affect his creativity was a dislike.
correct.
And his favorite drink was Coca-Cola. And there's a lot of interviews you go out there and find that if you just Google Paul McCartney interviews like 64, late 63, where he talks about where, he's anti-drug, about that stuff. And for me, and this is something I learned late, I wish I would have known this 5 years ago. I've learned more to convince me that the truth is that he died more on the peripherals than looking at Paul himself. Doing these deep dives on John Lennon. You've seen all my books on the shelves, Kim. I haven't read half of them yet because they're still coming in. But go look at the people around them. Read about John. Read about George. Read about Neil Aspinall, Mal Evans, and stuff like that. There's stuff in there that, for lack of a better way to phrase it, is kind of like you just take it at face value. It's inconsequential, but if you think about it and start putting the pieces together, it forms a picture.
Look at everything through the kaleidoscope of Paul is dead.
Right. If you look at it like, all right, he is dead, and then accept that, and whether you believe it or not, just look at it that way, and then look at all this other stuff. It comes and it does make a picture.
That's what I've been trying to do, and I was trying to do a little research on Epi and all that, but it's hard to find stuff just on the internet.
A lot of this stuff's been being suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
Yeah. Ann and I are working on the nonfiction book right now, and we're in the last stages. I mean, like the book is written, but we're doing the reference. Look at Ann smile. The reference, refreshing and checking. Some of these books. She started this book years ago, so some of the references she had were 2013, 2016, whatever, and they disappeared. But the references there and the quotes are there, but trying to refine that source so we can give a newer source. It's not easy.
Yeah.
No.
They're scrubbing the web with all sorts of kinds of things, not just the Paul stuff, but
it just happened to me 2 days ago. Annie, you sent me that link about Heather Mills from the Daily Mirror or Daily Mail. I clicked on it at work, read about half of it, had to go back to work, went back to it that night, and the link was gone that quick.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
stuff like that's printed. I don't have the time yet, and I know Ann doesn't have the time yet because we're so focused on getting this book done. But I bought a huge portable hard drive, and I want to start downloading videos and if it's an article, copy all the text and put it over in a Word document. And it's not authentic, it's not the authentic page or something, but take a screenshot of it, and then copy it. Otherwise, we're going to lose everything. I'm telling this to everybody out there listening to that,
Yeah.
Download videos, download screenshots, take articles, copy them.
And what is it that led you to believe that not only did he die, like the rumor was car wreck, but that he was actually murdered?
When I was investigating the Jimmy Savile ring.
Okay.
Yeah, and I found out that Brian Epstein was a part of that, and his connection with the mob, the Krays, Ron and Reggie Kray.
Yeah.
Because that tells me that the Krays were on the outside of the Beatles' inner circle, and the Krays were in Brian Epstein's circle.
Okay.
So Brian Epstein
was in their circle.
Yeah.
Brian, yeah, that's right. Whatever, you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you mean.
I'm gonna put Kim. If I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to get, like, when she read Shadow of a Baseman, I think where, Kim, you again correct me, where you're having a hard time is separating the fact that it's a fiction book presented as fiction and separating the fact part of it out. Am I right or wrong on that?
Yes, that's true.
I think a lot of people have that problem because they see dialogue we had to create unless it's a quote or something, but it's all based in information and resources that we had. Not all of it, but you know what I mean. There's, what did we count? 600 facts?
Mm-hmm.
600 facts in a 400-page book. So
And
that's,
see, I don't know
that's
which
more than
ones
one fact per
are.
page.
I don't know which ones those would be because I haven't done the research.
Yeah, but
You gotta
and
buy
that's
the
the
nonfiction
thing. You
book.
if it's something you're reading and you have keywords there, then Google it. See if you can.
I've been trying to do that.
I'm sure it's hard because there again, some of this stuff gets gone, and we do have the resources in the back of the book, the references.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm reading it on ebooks.
It should be in you'll still see like a number 1, and if you go to the back pages, then you'll have chapter 1, number 1, chapter 2, number 10, whatever.
Okay.
But there's like, how many references in that book? 40 to 50 per chapter? Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, all of our books are loaded with references for people to be able to actually see what we're using.
Okay.
We try to make it the obvious fiction, like, John did not marry Connie. Connie is our best friend, who's a big John Lennon fan.
We didn't want to put Yoko into the mix. We could have gone down a huge rabbit hole putting her in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we created it so some things were obvious that were fiction. John obviously didn't raise Paul's son.
Right.
But that was the only way to continue the series, because we wanted more books to bring out more information on government corruption that is around, PID. Okay, because the people that murdered him are the same people in power.
Right.
They have the same power, and this is the corruption that's going on in our system. So we wanted to expose some of that, because it's just not about Paul.
It's getting worse since.
Yeah.
Compared to what it was like in the 60s, it's even, look at what we have today.
It's real bad today.
Yeah. So if you understand today's issues and cabal type things, I got to watch what we're on YouTube, but
Right.
the manipulation is just exponential. So it's the same thing.
Yeah. And I personally have been in a situation that I can't talk about because of a lawsuit right now, but once that gets cleared, I'm going to explain my situation, just to kind of bring out the corruption. That There's a lot of corruption. And it's been going back, 100, 200 years it started or so, and it's just gotten way worse. So
I sometimes wonder if our government here has ever been non-corrupt.
right.
Probably not.
Probably.
Right.
Any is, as they say, anybody with power has power for a reason.
Right.
You have money for a reason. So when Ann was talking about us having using a Paul's son that got adopted in, we also know of a couple children that have been publicly out in the press, and then there's a few more that may not be out in the press. So by using Paul as a son, it's also giving homage to those kids and giving them an answer to the questions that they have.
Right.
As Paul's going through growing up, little Paul Jr., little Paul, as he's growing up, he's asking questions. The second book, he's wanting to know about John Lennon's death because John raised him. So we get into the assassination aspects.
Right.
We get into other government issues. Montauk is at the beginning of that book. That was a big thing. So anybody that's never heard of the Montauk Project by the government, thank you very much. 3-letter words. It's out there to look at. It's not a secret. Those things aren't secrets.
Right. Yeah, I did look up some of the stuff, like you were talking about the Cray brothers and that. I did look up that stuff, and it, found out it was real.
Yeah. Yeah, the Crays were
Nasty people.
nasty people.
Yeah.
But they were raised in that environment. East London is the hood, so to speak, of the crime district for London, and it was do what you got to do to survive.
Right.
From what you read and what you hear about that time period, and they turned around and ruled it in all aspects.
You remember that quote, Kim? I forget who said it, and I'm sure one of you two will remember it. Right, to say it, that Paul McCartney is constantly rewriting history.
Yes, Philip
and
Norman.
Ringo won't talk. And
Yeah,
you know, he's constantly rewriting history because, again,
Well,
he
now
has to. He
has-
wasn't there.
his
Yeah,
own
they're not his
idea of
memories.
what happened.
What's
What,
that,
Kim?
Kim?
He does have his own idea of how things happened. In every,
Yes.
it's different from what I've read.
Everyone. Right.
And that-
So there's a tell because it's not his history.
I'm gonna go back to the anthology series. That time where he was driving his truck on his farm up in Scotland, and he was talking about forming Wings. And he said, you know, he had no idea what he was doing because he came around and said, when I joined the Beatles were already a set up affair.
Correct.
That's not true. Paul,
That's not true.
he was the co-founder of the Beatles. He, you know,
Yeah,
But-
they evolved. I mean, they went from
Yeah.
the Quarrymen to the Silver Beatles to the whatevers and to
Right.
the Beatles. And
Yeah, Paul brought in George and Ringo.
right. So I mean,
Right.
Paul, he slips in when he talks. And-
he purposely says things, but he doesn't come out and say things. You know what I mean? You know, he says things so that you're getting the idea without telling.
And
They all did. They all
I
did.
firmly believe he wants the truth out there. He's tired of this charade. I really do think that. Yeah, he's fed up with it. He does. Why do I got to keep this up? I mean, again, we said it before. I'll say it again. He's a talented man in his own right, and he deserves recognition for what he's done. I won't take that away from him, and I think he's ready for the truth to come out. And I think the problem is the powers that be are not going to let it come out. I mean, even after Billy dies, we're still, it's like JFK. We're never going to get the whole truth. There's always going to be somebody there that's going to be burying it for their own self-interest. And I think I agree, right up to the COVID today and the Biden stuff going on. This all ties into the 60s and it started back in the 30s and 40s with, you know, MK Ultra and, you know, the CIA's experiments with mind
It
control.
started all the way back to the Wilson administration. I mean, that's where the corruption started and going forward.
Yeah, Wilson, he brought up, he's the first one ever publicly said New World Order.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just have a hard time wrapping my mind around a
We
conspiracy
all do.
that large.
And that's the only saving grace for us as to hopefully that down the road, you hate to say, well, once he dies, but look what happened when Jimmy Savile died. You know, all the things started coming out. People started talking. Same thing with the Crays. I mean, as far as a lot of things came out after they were both gone. So there's still, I mean, sadly, all their peers are also at that age where people are constantly passing over. So
Right. Yeah, I just have a hard time wrapping my head around it, I guess. It's just,
I did too for years. I mean,
I still do.
There was a part of me that refused to believe it, didn't want to believe it. You know, I've been a Paul McCartney fan since I was 5 years old. You
yeah.
know?
Wouldn't
And-
bother me, I mean, to find out that it was real, but I just have a hard time wrapping my head around it. I look at him and I think, okay, so to replace somebody with somebody that looks so much like him and that has so much talent, I just, the people
Billy
that
has talent in a
involved.
different way. He has piano talent versus bass. Paul was a better bass player. Billy's a better pianist.
I don't know. I look at him and I think, I don't know.
Now, Kim, like when we went and saw him in 2017, when I took you and Joe, I shouldn't took you, but we went together. I mean, look at that, or go look at videos. His stage presence, just the way he carries himself, and then you go look at the Beatles, 66, 65, 64. It's not even close. He doesn't hold the guitar the same way. His mannerisms are different. I mean, he's constantly looking at the fretboard today versus Paul McCartney never looked at it. Didn't matter if he was playing acoustic guitar or anything.
I've heard you say that before, but I looked at videos that I know were from, 64, 65, and he does look down occasionally. And it's just like,
Occasionally.
I've heard the thing about, well, he smoked with this hand till this year, and then he starts smoking. No, I've seen him smoke with both hands, in decades of looking at pictures of and stuff.
Yeah, he would switch hands to smoke depending on camera. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
I mean, I was a smoker. So, I mean, I primarily smoked right hand, but if somebody's on my right, I'm going to use my left.
Right.
I mean, I was always cognizant of, I'm not going to burn somebody or have their clothes, stick a hole in them or whatever.
And I just
If
looked
you
at,
watched our number 7 video, the Paul versus Billy video, halfway through, because it's a long video, halfway through we start into pictures of other comparisons. And the hands are one using of things. The frets is another, but that's not something you can put in a video, you know, like what we did, a slideshow. But
Right.
you can watch them. You can watch him do yesterday from before and today, and he doesn't look at the frets at all. You know, he'll glance maybe once or twice. Billy would be like every 2 lines you know, looking down.
okay.
But there's a difference because Billy's taller than Paul, there's a difference in his placement of the guitar. Paul had the bass, waist, hip frame versus hip, top of your leg frame. And you can see I have a lot of comparisons there where I measured them out. I measured the bass on this picture. Like, you can't change you know what do you call that? The bottom, not the frets, the other part.
The body?
The body of the
Is
guitar.
I was the body of it. If you look, I measured that from the bottom of the frets to the bottom of the thing. And I have a big monitor, and I measured that length on both pictures. And you can see the difference in the size of Paul.
And there's pictures out there, Kim, where they're standing together, because you've always said the height, you don't see a difference. I just found a picture this week where they're all standing there for a photo, and they actually, I don't know how it got out there, but John, George, and Ringo are standing on a platform. Paul is next to him, not on a platform, and he's actually got his knees bent a little bit to bring his height down.
That is in that video 7. It was at Brian's house. It was the Sgt. Pepper release, and he looks ginormous. And there's actually a musician that we know, Ann and I know. I shouldn't say this probably, that's worked with him and said he didn't know, but he knew when he came in the room, he knew there was something going on because he was so big. I think another person that's in our group that's a friend of somebody else. I'm not saying any of these things because I don't want to get anybody outed. That same thing. He walked into a room and took up the whole doorway. He said, and it was just like, he was flabbergasted at how big he was.
But he doesn't look that way to me now. I mean,
He did well. Now he's 80.
A little bitty guy.
I've lost an inch in my height in the last year and a half from all this sitting that we've done through teleworking and everything. I'm sure he's lost height. He's 80 some years old.
Yeah.
You're not going to keep that same stature that you had when you were in your 20s and 30s.
Right.
And this is a fact you can look up too, Kim. Going back to those cards that came out with the Beatles, had his Paul shoe size on there. It was a size 8. They've got, you can look at it now.
It's in that video too.
9.5 or something. Now it's like a size and a half bigger. There's
he made the mistake of putting his shoes up for auction, and they were a size 9.5.
Did he make the mistake though, or was it him saying, he's sneaky that way?
My foot's bigger now than it was in my 20s.
Yeah, but that's women. Women do that, but men don't. We do that from carrying children and whatever.
Have you ever looked at his body hair? And I know that sounds weird, but I'm talking about the hair like on your arms and stuff. Your arms.
I have a comparison of underarm hair in that video. You go dispute that. You go dispute that.
I'll have to look at
underarm hair. Yes.
His arm hair looks the same to me in every decade. Like it's straight and it's dark, and he's very hairy, like from his wrist all the way to just past where his elbow bends, and then there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And they're consistent throughout.
I think Billy tends to dye that hair so it's darker and it looks more pronounced, because there's some pictures where you can see it's not dark, it's reddish. So
I don't know. It looks like the same arm hair to me.
well,
All the pictures I've seen, but
the underarms don't lie.
There's a missing mole on his chest too.
Yeah, I have those pictures are there too.
The what, Vic?
There's a missing mole where Paul had a mole right by
You can get those.
by his nipple.
That's not
It-
hard.
We're going
It
down
was
a
about
rabbit
an
hole.
inch. It was about an inch up into the.
Yeah,
You know,
and
up
then
into
pictures
the-
of like the famous ones in '68, that photo shoot where Paul or Billy was just had the purple vest on, and some of them he had it off, and that fake fist fight
That
with John.
day
and all. You can show those, and that mole's not there anymore. I mean, again,
It wasn't there anymore back when he was. Well, I guess that is probably the same time frame when he was dating Maggie, and they were on the beach. I think it was him and Maggie. And there's some pictures there. It's not there either.
and then there's the
Believe me, I zoom in.
foot disease, or not disease, that thing. I don't believe he has 6 toes, but I forget what that thing has, where he's got that deformity on his foot. Paul didn't have that, but you go look at it from Abbey Road, even back to '69, you can see Billy's got that deformity on his foot. And there's pictures of
It's a hallux extended, and mine's been doing that lately from tension. So I don't know if he was clutching his toes at the time, and so that the hallux is elevated, or if that was something that was a permanent thing. But yeah, that he had an issue with his big toe.
I get like a cramp in my old age where let's say my big toe will
Yeah.
take a left turn and just want to go this way, where it's spread out like that, and it's painful. And it's almost what his looks like, and it's got that like hook in it.
Yeah.
You can see it on the Abbey Road album cover. Man, I got the shirt on. Maybe we can see it there, but you actually can look it down at my
You
shirt.
can. It sticks up.
But there's plenty of pictures of like Paul in Miami in '64, during when they were on the El Salvador show down there on the beach and stuff.
diving
during the
board.
help, where he's barefoot and doesn't have it.
No.
Again,
Little things.
Yeah. And have you ever looked at pictures of his youngest child that we know about?
Beatrice,
Yeah, that child. Have you ever
I've
looked?
never seen a picture of her. Believe it or
Okay.
not.
She stays out. Heather keeps her out. Your
Look.
camera flip.
There's pictures of her where she looks like Paul.
Well, Billy does look like Paul. He's had refinements to make him look more like Paul, but his ear markers are not the same. I mean, there's the little things that you have to look at. The difference from the nose and I forget what the septum thing is called. There's different facial markers and stuff that are different, but he's similar. And I mean, obviously he's similar enough. That's why he's gotten away with it all this time. But Beatrice does look like she could be Paul, but so does look at Bettina. Bettina looks like she is Paul at some points, right?
Yeah. I just didn't know how she could look like Paul if she was Billy's.
Well, Billy's son
Because they're
James.
similar.
For me, I think Paul had, my wife calls him, he had those sad hound dog eyes almost, his
Puppy
eyes.
dog eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she calls him. James McCartney has those eyes, and he's Billy's son, in my opinion. So, I mean, again, like I said, Billy looked enough like Paul before it ever started that.
That's
and I
why he
think-
was chosen.
Yeah, and I think Billy was in the picture way
Hard to
before
follow. It
we
would
give
be
him credit
somebody
for now. I think he was hanging around there in '63, '64. He was in the Beatles' outer circle all along.
Well, he would have
I've
been
read stuff where
observing.
It's
where
just
Paul might have even known him.
that they would have an agent that looks so much like him that he could pass for him and has musical talent. I just find that so hard to swallow.
you might be surprised how many agents are in the music industry anyways.
Yeah.
There are agents.
Probably.
They have infiltrated every aspect, every organization in this country and in foreign countries. That's what they do. That's how they collect their intel. So to me, anyways, it's not unusual to have somebody that looks like somebody posing as somebody that's an agent gathering intel.
So,
That's
do you
a
have
whole
any
nother
idea
topic.
when your nonfiction book is coming out?
Hopefully, our target is September, October.
No, I don't think it'll be that
No.
long. Do you
We
think it'll
got to
be
do a
that
couple.
long?
We got to do a couple read-throughs yet too.
Yeah.
Damn, Andy Marion's cracking
Maybe.
that whip. You better get going.
I was hoping to get it done so I can sort of enjoy the summer a little bit.
Yeah. I'm
You
not
know,
I mean, we have
forward to
been at
that
it.
one.
We have been at it though. I mean,
there's some days where I'm like, all of a sudden I'll be like, where did the day go? And I was on my computer for like 14 hours in the book,
Oh,
not,
wow.
doing. So I had my supplement sitting here to take all day long and I forgot to do it. So yeah, it's been it's a lot right now.
I'm looking forward to that coming out. I want to read that for sure.
Me too.
Thank you. We appreciate
Yeah,
it.
and
I'm in the
just-
middle of the second book right now, the fiction story. What's the name of the second book?
Shadow
Shadow
Dance.
Yeah,
There we go. Shadow Dancing. That's what I'm reading right now. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some stuff in there, but basically we were just trying to lay the foundation for the future books. But there is stuff in there about Paul and some other conspiracies. When you read about what happened to the Irish band, that's the true
I
story.
read that part and I looked that up too. I Googled that to see
Yep,
and I did
that was all
find
true.
that. Yeah.
Yes. So that was the British government. That was MI5, MI6 that did that to that Irish band.
Miami Showboat.
Show band. The
Show
Miami
band.
Show band. Yeah. So if they can do it to this Irish band, they certainly can do it to any band they chose.
And just
Oh,
look
I-
at what they're
I just, why target rock bands?
It's not. Look at what's going on in Hollywood and all the stuff that's come out in the last 10, 15 years of all the corruption and the sexcapades and the
Satanic.
satanic stuff that's coming out that, it's the entertainment field worldwide. It's not just the, music, it's entertainment, period.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question, Kim. Why target rock bands? Because they have a lot of influence.
They
And,
do.
and
true.
people, the masses will trust a rock star or an actor, actress over politicians. They have tremendous
Credibility.
influence. So if you're on the wrong side of the fence, and let's just take the Beatles, for instance, when they came here to the United States, they were pro-civil rights, anti-war. Well, that didn't go very well. Because here we are, we're in the middle of Vietnam War. Well, not in the middle, but Vietnam War, we're just starting.
Right.
So the government is trying to get that support from the people to continue this war.
And they're preaching peace.
And they're preaching peace. And it's
Yeah.
like, that doesn't go on.
Yeah.
So, and they were also for freedom of speech, too. And,
Yeah.
a lot of ways we are suppressed with our First Amendment
And-
right.
And getting more so
Kim,
every day.
you and I are probably about the same age. So when we were in grade school, I mean, segregation was a thing. Even here, I'm near a war college. And when we were kids, the war college was on the opposite end of town. They bused those kids across town to my elementary school.
I remember the busing. Yep, I remember the busing. That one in my area too.
Yeah. So
I'm
that
a
was the
baby. I
stuff
don't
they were
remember any of
getting.
that.
I mean, that was a big thing that they were talking about. Paul purposely would go out of his way. There was a black photographer. He went out when he saw he was being jostled around by people and not getting photos. He purposely went out to him and let him take his picture as many times as he wanted. And he was very nice to the man. And that wasn't taken very well.
I
Well,
see.
stuff you guys-
that
okay.
for- I'm sorry, what?
Go ahead.
I see John as more of a mouth for the piece, you know, because he was, I don't know, I just see him
But
as.
that was a way, taking Paul out of the picture, John was volatile in that what he could say, and he would be bombastic. Paul was elegant, quiet, and leading it right straight through.
I guess that's why I don't remember it. I don't remember him being so outspoken.
He was the person who was, you know, mostly speaking. John would come up with the liners of blasting something.
Right.
When you guys
But
just brought
Paul
up,
was the one who was like the statesman. So, and taking Paul out kept John in line. I mean, John fell 66, 67, John fell apart.
you just
Yeah.
brought up
I
John
always,
Hungham. This one's for you. I'm trying to, it was 60, I think it was 66. It was the same time it was one of those interviews here in North America where John was on his apology tour, as I like to call it. One of the reporters asked Paul about Vietnam, and John, we're not allowed to talk about that. And he said even that they were being controlled about what they could say and couldn't say in these press conferences.
oh, I'm sure they were. I'm sure.
You're thinking about the Memphis interview, I think, in the they were in the locker room type, where he was giving a little bit more of an answer than they would have liked.
Yeah, and John interrupted and said, no, we're not allowed to talk about that because Paul was getting ready to unload.
But see, I see John's downfall not because of losing Paul, but because of his choice in partners and heroin.
Yeah, but the heroin started before, well, it started after Paul and before.
I think John spiraled because of Paul's death, and that's why he got into the heroin to begin with, his release of pain. And then I think the spouse, who should not be named,
For his,
encouraged his use on it as a way to control him.
Yeah.
I've always
Again,
blamed
I
the
don't
wife.
think that was a marriage made in naturally.
And
leave it at that.
heroin was around. I mean, that was something that they were offered back when they were filming Help.
Right. Yeah, that was
Paul
a big,
refused.
Huh?
that was
Paul
a big
refused.
deal that big thing back then, the drugs and heroin and
Yeah. Yeah, it was a big thing, but
I
that's-
always just thought it was because of her that John got.
no, but revelations have come out that she was not only doing heroin with him back then, but she's still to this day, well,
Yeah.
not to this day, to the day of that interview. When was that? And was that in the 80s, that interview, or was it in the 90s?
Oh, 89, I think it was.
Was
I
it
thought-
89?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some stuff we found in an interview that was really enlightening.
What was that? The Klaus Borman movie? Was it All You Need Is the one you were just telling me about, Annie, the other night?
Above Us in the Sky? That's
yeah.
on Netflix?
Is it that one? 'Cause I was trying to find it. And tell her about the scene in that movie where Klaus was visiting John in '67 and how he would just sit there and
Oh,
cry.
in the bush.
You know,
Yeah.
it's the stuff like this that really hits me hard. Where
Yeah.
well, I've got other reasons I think this is true that I've recently experienced. I don't want to talk about, but I swear to God, Kim, I unquestionably believe this is true. To the point where I've come to the conclusion I'm actually in mourning about it. Yeah, it's hitting hard for me right now. But anyway, I'll let her tell you about this because for me, this is just another, like the veil comes off.
Another
And you see
nail.
this stuff.
It's hard to take at first when you come
It's
to
hard
that
to take
conclusion.
years later.
Yeah, it's gut-wrenching, actually. It's heartbreaking. But the movie Victor is talking about is called Above Us Only Sky, and you can find that on Netflix if it's still available, but that's where I saw it a couple years ago.
Okay.
And Klaus Borman was a friend of the Beatles going back to the Hamburg days. He was
Right, I know
a
that
bass
name.
player. Okay, he was a bass player. So he went to visit John in the spring of '67 when they were doing, Sgt. Pepper. And Klaus found him in his garden, John's garden, and John was picking leaves off a tree, and he was crying, and he was really upset. And he's just like, Klaus, I can't do this anymore. This is terrible. And Klaus was kind of vague about what was going on, but John had a breakdown. And also Cynthia Lennon wrote in one of her books that during that same period, the spring of '67, she would find John out in their pool area, and John would be sitting next to the pool just crying and uncontrollably just crying into the pool, watching his tears fall into the pool. So he had definitely some severe depression going on at that time. John even said in an interview, it was his last interview, the Playboy interview of 1980 before he passed, that his depression started in September of '66. So something was going on that triggered his severe depression, where he wouldn't eat, he couldn't sleep, he was watching TV all the time, just laying around the couch. He was just absolutely miserable, and he was taking a lot of drugs. So something triggered that.
Then tie that in with George's comments that you've seen about how all those interviews that George gave about something happened in late '66 where everything changed, and
Yeah, it was something that was so terrible he didn't even want to talk about.
Right.
It.
And I personally believe, and I don't know if you guys agree, I think going back to some of these interviews where Paul would question the road the Beatles were going on and the fame wasn't what he thought it was going to be, part of me actually thinks Paul wanted out altogether, like wanted out of the Beatles about that time. And, I've had enough. This isn't what I want to do. And I think if he would have lived, I don't know, maybe the Beatles would not have went on anyway. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's just the feeling I get from reading stuff and looking between the lines of some of the interviews and the comments he made at that time.
That's why we wrote it that way in The Shadow of a Bass Man, that he and his girlfriend were going to go to the States. Where the money, when we had John searching for that. And the other aspect, we have the Bush scenario in that book too, except for instead of Klaus, it's George he's talking to. He's pulling the leaves off the bush and George finds.
Yeah, I read that part.
So that's a true story. We just changed the character George for Klaus.
Yeah, and it's based on that story. Yeah.
So that's where we're saying we based a lot of things in fact, and just either change names around or change something to keep it into the fiction.
Right.
Because Klaus just didn't fit that particular storyline that we were trying to write, because we wanted to go into other things that George, when he went to the Monterey Pop Festival, how disappointed he was in that, because everybody was drugged. And he thought it was going to be this spiritual enlightenment, God, uplifting spiritual experience, and it wasn't. It was just the big C operation that was going on.
That's a prelude to San Francisco.
The Kool-Aid wasn't really Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
And that's also why, Kim, I think George got into religion so heavily in that time frame with the Eastern philosophies and going to India and all that stuff. He was looking for a way to assuage his grief and try to make sense of losing Paul, because they were very close too. I mean, everybody talks about John and Paul, but George and Paul were extremely close also, just in a different way.
George and Paul were also raised Catholic, and I'm thinking his spirituality, he was going away and trying to find more of the meaning of what's beyond. And, George was always seeking that what's beyond us, out the esoteric. So
I had the privilege of meeting Louise Harrison one time. She managed
George's sister.
Yeah.
I
went down to Branson. I went down to Branson and I saw the band that she was managing, the Liverpool Legends, which is a Beatle, tribute band.
I've seen them.
They're great. They really are great. And she came out during halftime and she was taking questions from the audience, and this guy asked her, what is Paul McCartney really like? And she says, oh, everybody loves Paul. From the time that George brought him home off the bus when he was about 13 years old, I fell in love with Paul. So she went on to say that George was very, very spiritual from the time he was just a little kid. And had he not been a Beatle, she could have seen him going into the church as a priest or being very involved with the church and religion and God.
Oh,
So
wow.
he was very, very a godly man, and he wanted that connection that with God, and that was his purpose. You know, that's what he wanted to do, was have the closest relation with God while he was here on earth. And I think that definitely shows, you know, his growing up about that time in 1966 and getting into his own spirituality and doing that.
Yeah.
So
He always said that had to come first.
yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got to have that connection.
Right.
Yeah, she was a wonderful person, very kind, very nice, and she really enjoyed meeting Beatle fans.
Yeah, I hated reading that they were estranged for so long.
Yeah, I don't know about, she didn't mention anything like that, but she
Right.
loved her brother very, very much,
Oh, yeah.
very
Yeah,
much.
doubt.
Yeah. And she loved Paul. She loved Paul a lot, she said.
Well,
She
let's be
fell in love
honest.
with him.
Is there a woman born after 1940 that doesn't love Paul McCartney?
He's very charming.
Very talented.
Yes.
Goodness. But
I mean,
And
I'll
Billy-
admit, he was a good-looking guy. Okay, so we'll just go with that.
Well, Billy too. I mean, his interview. I mean, he's charming. He's talented.
Oh, Billy's anything but charming.
I don't see him as this villain bad guy that you guys portray, because I've not heard any stories to back that. His kids have never come forward and said, you know, my dad was mean, or
Well, they're not going to.
or
I
They
think
want-
Billy's more. He comes across to me condescending in interviews more than anything else.
oh, but I just lay that to the fame. You know, fame changes people.
Fame, even for Billy, he's been famous a long time. Even
Yeah.
as Paul, he's been famous a long time.
Right.
So that always contributes. He actually says, when that section in the first book when talking about Japan. Now, Ann and I both know the person who heard Denny Lane's, was with Denny Lane when he said that the pink fingerprints didn't match in Japan. And Billy has come out and said, I was so arrogant at the time, I didn't think that they would do what they did. He had that pot like right there on top of his clothes in his suitcase, and it wasn't like a small little mount. It wasn't a wee little bit.
Right.
So, yeah, I think, Paul himself was a little bit more humble, even in 65, 66.
Well, you would be
so-
before you're famous.
No, I mean, even when he was famous as during Beatlemania.
During Beatlemania, yeah.
I would argue that
As the bad guy, that
66 was the height of Beatlemania. It was all down there. I mean, for him to be humble then,
Yeah,
I don't think anything was going to change him, because, like I said, I think
That was
Rubber
just his
Soul Revolver
personality.
period, they were at their height of everything. I mean, they were firing on all cylinders together. Their popularity was sky high, and all four of them actually, I think, maintained a sense of humbleness through it all,
yeah.
which I
Mark
find
Lane-
amazing.
Mark Lane even said, and this was probably in 65, 66, that he didn't have any idea of what his contribution to the world was through his music at that age. I don't know the exact quote, but
yeah.
Yeah, he didn't understand his contribution to music
Yeah.
at 22, 23 years old. Yeah.
You think about a 22-year-old kid, and again, to me, looking back at my age, 22-year-old, your kid. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to write a song like Yesterday at 22 years old, I mean, who comes up with that stuff? I mean, you think of the lyrical content of it, it's pretty deep.
Well,
That he's already self-examining himself, and I do believe that song was written about him. He was
Same as
self-examining.
Eleanor Rigby.
See, I never got that out of Eleanor Rigby.
Put Paul in as Eleanor.
I never thought of it that way. But again, what's going on in his life? 22 years
Make
old.
him go
You're
there. Yeah.
Arguably the most famous person on the planet. To be thinking that way. I mean, I know what I would have been doing. I've been going off the rails.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have your circle because that's the only thing you have. Your circle of friends is what you have. And if you don't want to be in that circle anymore, then what do you do?
Well, yeah, it's funny you bring up the circle of friends. That's the other thing the Beatles did that is different. They never had that entourage that they felt like they had to support. The people that stayed with them when they were famous were the same small group that was with them when they were broke and teenagers. And it was very difficult to get into that circle. So for today, you got an entourage of 500 people to go with you to the restaurant anymore if you're famous.
Oh, they only had Mal and Neil, Tony and whoever else.
I got a question about Neil. Are we allowed to talk about him?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's not on the watch list for YouTube's.
I think he was the I am a phony guy. I think
Yeah,
he was
I
the one
think so
making
too.
those. Do you think? Okay, I was just wondering about that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I watched those
We just
videos
talked about
for
this
years.
yesterday.
What's that?
We just talked about that yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah.
Because the videos also stopped about the same time he passed.
Neil died. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the questions. So again, I don't know, Kim, if you've ever watched any of those. It's a whole series of videos, and they go blindingly fast. I mean, you've really got to be quick on the pause
I'm
button.
going to download that whole channel before it gets taken out.
But
we
he's
did a whole
dropping clues
chapter. We
that
did a whole
public
chapter in the
plays.
back of our nonfiction book on YouTube clues because there's so many out there and people aren't aware of them. And the I am a phony is one of them.
Check him out because I believe it was Neil Aspinall, and so did they. And he was in the inner circle. And what was the purpose of him doing all these videos? And it was all about Paul being replaced and being dead.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, and we can Victor, send her a link to the YouTube channel because it's all together. I am a phony is all together, no spaces.
I'll send it to you this afternoon, Kim.
Okay. And where does the information come from that Billy is so bad?
Oh, you mean in our book?
No, I mean, in your beliefs, why do you believe that that he's a bad person?
Well, for the book's sake, we had to have an
Antagonist.
Okay, you had to have a villain.
So Billy actually represents two people. His replacement, whoever he is, because we don't know who he is. And it also, he represents Intel, British Intel,
Okay.
and some of the evilness that they do. And
Yeah.
So don't,
Yeah, wait for book 3. People are going to be like flying off the rails.
yeah. But, in order to tell what happens in these secret societies of a certain group of people that's in charge of our world, we've done some digging into these secret societies, and we found out some of the things that they do when they are being recruited into the organizations, some of the things they do, their beliefs, and all that. So we use the character Billy in our book to tell those stories. Also, we have listened to hundreds of hours of testimony from survivors of ritual abuse. So we take some of those stories and put it into a fiction way so that we can tell these stories of the survivors of these rings
Oh,
and
so
the
you have
sacrifice.
to talk to some of them.
Yeah. So that's
Oh.
why we put that in the first book, that Paul was saving children, because this has been, it's going on now, but it's been going on for a very, very long time.
Okay.
Hunting parties and all sorts of things. That's been going on. This is going on back then.
And there's documentation of this too.
Wow.
There's people now coming out that are telling their own truth of themselves, what happened to them, what they saw, what they witnessed, or what they were put through.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
very
think
sad.
Billy's evil, Kim. I just think I actually have a sympathetic part to him, because I don't think he asked for what happened to him.
Yeah.
He's talented in his own right. I think you think about what he gave up to take on this role of Paul McCartney, his own family, gone. You can't acknowledge any of it.
Any information on any of that?
If I was him at this point in time, I would be, what about me?
Right.
I wrote Band on the Run. I wrote Hey Jude. I wrote Let It Be. Well, if he did, for all those, they could have been Paul songs that were written in 66, 65 that were dragged out years later, who knows? But the point I'm making is, the 70s and 80s and 90s are filled with a lot of good music that Billy wrote that he gets no credit for.
Yeah.
And I sympathize with him on that a little bit. I mean, I don't think he's evil. I think he's
I think it's
sympathetic in a
sad.
lot of ways, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there's a part of me that doesn't like him just because of who he replaced.
Oh,
That's
don't
just
hold that.
that's emotion for me. That's all it is. It's pure
what
emotion.
happened.
I mean, I'm at the point now, Kim, where I hear song post 66 and it's Billy singing it. I turn it off because I can't listen to it right now. It irritates me.
It's very hard to do because because of the knowing.
Mm.
But the thing is, if you look at all their post 66 songs, they all have clues in them. There's so many songs that have backmasking in them. It's ridiculous. Even Billy's last, what was it, Creation?
Chaos of Creation in the Backyard.
Yeah. I mean, there's backmasking in that. Backmasking is done in the studio purposely. And the sound engineer talked about what you had to go through to put the backmasking in. And that's in all of their records. And they're all PID clues. Why in their songs, in their lyrics, pre and post Beatles, is that stuff all there? Why continue? Why continue it? If he wants to get angry about people, if he wants to get angry about people like us who want to know the truth about what happened, you're the one that's telling the stories. You're the one that's putting his talking in first person about himself, third person, whichever
Third,
person.
what he's saying? Yeah, I think it's third.
When he says, he got his hair cut. Who talks about themselves? Oh, I was getting my hair cut that day. But no, he's getting his hair cut.
Oh, he gave that interview where he came out and said,
James Corden
Paul
interview.
McCartney is the character I play in public. He's here, I'm here.
Yeah.
I mean, he came out,
when
he
I'm
did-
home, I'm a different I'm a
Exactly.
different person.
I hadn't seen any of that.
and I just read, here's a new one for you that new for me and Kim. I don't know, you guys might have seen it. Flowers in the Dirt. Remember that album?
Yeah.
For me, now, when that came out, I personally, at the time, before I realized what was going on, I thought Flowers in the Dirt, up until that point, was probably the best post-Beatles Paul album ever made. Really liked it. I just read recently, not presented as fact or anything like that, just somebody's opinion, and I got thinking about it, made sense, that whole Flowers in the Dirt album cover was a montage back to the funeral scene on the cover of Sgt. Pepper. Flowers in the dirt, the flowers all over the cover, and then they pointed to a song on the back of it. I cannot remember for the life of me what it is, but he's singing about a funeral. And and I'm, as soon as we get off this thing, I'm gonna go look it up and post the song.
Yeah, post it in the group.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, that he's putting out there that, people don't put two and two together you get four because you're not thinking about it. You're told, like you, Kim, for 50 years, you believe that Billy is Paul McCartney. You've never questioned it. Therefore, you see it. For me, I was the same
Now
way.
we question everything.
Yeah, now, like I said, he blinks and I'm questioning, is that really a real eye in there? Or is that a glass eye?
Don't go there. It's not a glass eye.
Well, yeah, you know what I was referring to then. Okay.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, I
don't
knew what
think
you
it
were
is either,
referring
but,
to.
that's just how ridiculous it can get sometimes. But then the live
Sometimes I
album
feel
in
like, why are you
93.
pushing it to this point, to the point where then people are going to say, oh, now you're really going to, now it's all, and it discounts everything.
Mm-hmm.
But
So I mean, he's dropping clues in his albums up until today. I mean,
Oh, he still
Egyptian was filled with them. I mean, the whole
Egypt,
album
yeah.
covers the occult,
yeah.
and I know
Yeah, that's the other thing. He does a lot of occult things.
I haven't even listened to McCartney 3 yet, so I
Oh,
don't know
they
what.
don't mean
But look
what-
at McCartney 3's album cover.
It's just three dice.
It's a
three.
die, and there's three die.
Now, Kim, you'll say that's because it's the third in the series, McCartney 2, McCartney 3. We look at it and say 3 because there's 3 surviving Beatles at the time.
What?
The album cover is a black cover with a dice,
Yeah,
a
I got-
die,
didn't hear what
one,
Vic said.
And it's got the 3 dots on it. You'll look at it and right off the get-go think, okay, it's because it's McCartney
It's
3.
his third,
Makes sense.
yeah. His
We'll
is
look at it, the first thing that pops into my head is a direct reference to
Three or
the
dead.
three dead Beatles, or back
Uh-huh.
then, 3
Yeah.
surviving Beatles, if you believe what was going on back in the 60s, that, it's
It's not it's the aspect of the 3, but it's on a dice, which when it's one dice, it's called a die.
Right.
3 die.
I didn't pick that one up until
John,
you just
Paul,
said it.
and George.
Mhm.
Yeah, when that came
It's
out,
like-
that was the first thing that hit me. I was like, really, here you're telling again. They're
It's
minor
Masonic.
tells for people that don't get it. But when
It's
you put it
Masonic
in the bigger
language.
picture,
It's Masonic language.
yeah.
Because they can't tell you. They can't be straightforward and say, hey, this is the truth. They, because they can't reveal their secrets. That's against the rules. That's actually goes against the order. And it's looked at as treason if you do it. So, and back in that time, the penalty for treason, because we're talking government and we're talking royals and all that stuff. So at that time, the punishment for treason was death. So if you reveal the secret, a government secret, the punishment is death.
Right.
So they couldn't say anything. So how else can they get the truth out? Well, they make up their own way of doing things. And John, being a genius with an IQ of 150, I think it was. And George had extremely high IQ also. This is what they came up with in order to leak out the truth.
As did Paul.
As
High IQ.
But Paul had an extremely high IQ too, yeah. At age
You
11.
guys trying to say Ringo was just a dummy?
There's no information on his. There's no information on his taken IQ, so we can't.
I said
he
this
didn't go to
joke
school to
is-
take one.
I
We
told
can't
Annie
speak
the other
to
day
that.
that I always shortchange Ringo. When I always talk about the Beatles, for me, it's always John, Paul, and George. And I'm like, yeah, Ringo was there too, and I never give him any credit.
I give him a lot of credit for hanging in there and playing, like for
Yeah.
the playing that he did and the timekeeping that he did and keeping them on track. And he doesn't get enough credit as a drummer, I don't think, in the overall picture of a lot of bands.
Oh, you just look at videos. I think it was Annie. You said it in one of those podcasts that you could just see how much Paul relied on his drumming when they were on stage and they couldn't hear anything. Whenever any of them lost their place, where
Ringo
they
got
were
him
in the
back.
songs. They turn around and look at Ringo and see where he was at and not miss
Yeah.
a beat.
I posted that video not too long ago where Paul was singing "I'm Down," and he started with the second verse as the first verse. Then when it was time to do the second verse, he was sitting there thinking, "Oh shit, what did I do?"
Yeah.
And Ringo got him back on track because he changed his drum line so that Paul could then go into the refrain or the verse or whatever it was.
Ladies, this is your opportunity to talk about me. I got to disappear for just a second.
Okay,
I'll be right back.
no problem.
What should we say?
Oh, gosh. I can tell you some
Tell us
stories.
all his secrets, Kim.
He's definitely one of the biggest Beatles fans that I know, for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of big Beatle fans out there, like, well, obviously, they're
Yeah.
all going to the concerts. They're still spending the money.
Yep.
I would have loved to have gone to see Billy when he was in Hershey, but I actually wasn't paying attention to concerts back then, but I don't think I could have afforded the tickets.
We went, it was 2017, I believe, when Victor, Victor and my husband, we all went to see Paul, Billy, whomever you might refer.
Yeah.
But he really does put on a good concert. I was
He does.
worried because it's like, okay, he's getting up in years. Is it going to be just somebody up there, long past their prime? But no, he really put on a good concert.
So you've seen him live,
Yes.
but watch Paul concert playing and then watch Billy concert playing. Billy, they're totally different. Nobody changes. Paul had been playing on stage for 10 years, 56, but later, whatever, a long time. He had a way of standing. He had a way of keeping time. He had a way of walking in, walking out.
Okay. I've never paid that close of attention to
Billy
any.
doesn't do it. No, Paul stood with his knees inward. He had like a knock knee, but
Yeah.
he kept his thighs tight, and he would push off sometimes with the back, and he would push off, and I can't even describe it. It's one of those where maybe if I had the capability of showing videos to show the comparison, but he would shuffle in and shuffle out. I don't think when people are playing instruments and they're on stage, those are things that they do, and I don't believe that it changes.
No, it comes natural. I mean,
It's natural what he does, and they're two totally different things. Paul would sing this way, da da da, whatever, back and forth. Billy does the regular, like most people would do. Do you know what I mean? Head down and back versus side to side. He compensates for that head nod that Paul did only when playing. He didn't do it in real life, and Billy flicks his head all the time. Paul never flicked his hair. Never did this, whatever. I'm probably looking very stupid trying to do it because I don't even have hair to flip. But that's two totally different ways of playing, doing the head and then tossing the head. So he tries to make up for his not being able to do one thing with doing something else that Paul never did.
Yeah.
People see that head flicking, they'll think, oh, that's Paul. No, but Paul didn't do that. Billy does it.
I'll have to go back and look at.
He constantly flips his head, flips his hair. Even if his hair's not in his face, he'll be flipping his head.
Yeah. He does
Paul
that.
never did that. Never.
Yeah, even when he's not singing, he does.
Yeah. That's when he does it a lot. He does it too when he's singing, but Paul never did that. Paul only kept time with his head side to side while he was playing. I was telling her about the difference in the hair, how Billy flips his hair
Versus Paul's.
versus Paul's. And Paul did, but Billy does it off stage too. He does it in interviews. Like, look at me, I'm Paul. because he's.
Yeah, and he's always running his hands through his hair too, where
Paul never touched
never-
his hair.
yeah.
He had it where he wanted it.
No comment.
Well, I know.
Yeah. So anything else we can hit on? We're an hour and 20 in, so.
Oh, this is a short one.
Well, we can speak, we can talk. I just want to have whatever you want to talk about.
Like I told you, Kim, nothing is off the board here. This is your chance to ask the horse's mouth here any question you have, because
Well, I have been, as I think of them, I've been.
Yeah, she's been doing a great job.
I'll ask one for you, because this is one that you and I talk about all the time, where I try to explain to her how it's countries in Europe, the ear stuff and facial recognition is the same thing as fingerprints here in the United States and DNA testing. It's irrefutable.
Correct.
And I sent her the link for the Italian forensic report.
Looked it all.
And she looked it up and read it, and she's looked at some of the pictures, and she's kind of, in her mind, she hasn't seen a picture yet that convinces her, because for her, and again, I can see exactly where she's coming from because I see both sides. Photos can be manipulated. You can take today's technology.
They have been.
You can manipulate them to make them look different. You can manipulate them to make them look the same. So she's not really putting a lot of credence into the photographic evidence because, again, in her mind, it's been manipulated the other way, if at all.
Well, the Italia ones, from the Carlucci's, those were original photographs. They didn't send somebody those photographs that were photoshopped.
Well, like we were talking this morning before we got online. In her mind, and Kim, if I'm putting words in your mouth, tell me to shut up.
Okay.
Distances from camera angles and everything. I was trying to explain to her that with today's technology, you could take any of those pictures and the program will manipulate them and line them up where they're the same, measure the distance between the eyes and get that focal point where that doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
And
go ahead.
And she's not quite buying in any of that. So I'm wondering if there's anything you guys can say, because for me, even with the one that was posted last night with Biden, I mean, the ear, that's telltale right in there. But again, she brings up a great point. If we're so great with latex, why can't we make the ears match?
Because when Ann posted that one on Biden, the first thing I went to was looking at the ears. And the ears are different. The attached earlobe versus an unattached earlobe down here at the bottom. The outer rim is different. And same thing with the notches and the placement. The other thing different with Paul and Billy is, and I can't remember which one's which. One's ear is might be, how do I want to say this? One might be this way, whereas another one's back that way.
Paul's ears came out like this a little bit, for lack of
Well, yeah, there's that too.
And then Billy's are more in.
Billy, I think, wore prosthetic ears early on. So the size was different, but then his proportion was different anyway. I think it'll really benefit if you go through our number 7 video.
Yeah.
Because I actually drew lines across Paul's, like from his lower eye across here, across the tip of the nose, and then down at the chin.
Because once the computer lines those up, it doesn't matter where the distance between the lens and where you're standing, the computer's lining up the measurement.
Yeah. And when I did those pictures, I measured the eyeball from here to here. This particular, well, no, maybe it was the other one, their right eye, because my camera's flipped. But I measured the corner to corner, just like I measured the base from the fret to the bottom, so that both match. So when I had a picture of Paul on this side and a picture of Billy on the other side, their eyeball I measured so it was the same. So the proportion was the same. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah. I blew the pictures up. If a picture is like this, I blew it up this way so that it doesn't change proportions. I didn't take anything in, squish it or that, you know what I mean?
Right.
It went proportion. And then I made sure that their eyeball was the same, because your eyes don't change. They don't change size. Ears do. Ears grow, noses grow.
Right.
But Billy's nose is growing differently than what Paul's was, even back then. Noses and ears don't grow in that 10-year time frame from 65, 66 to the mid 70s.
And if you want,
Granted, I only have pictures of Paul to you. The pictures I have, he's 23, 24, 22, because that's all we have.
Right.
in our book, Shadow of the Baseman, we have a picture of Paul in there. That's an unmanipulated, undoctored photograph of him. That's what he originally looked like. I have the negative.
Yeah.
I have the negative. And I went to a lab and I got photographs. And they gave me, a disc so I could download that picture into my computer, and that's what I did. But that picture is
it's an
not
original.
manipulated. Yeah, it's an original, and I actually have it right here.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's very hard to find an unaltered picture of Paul today, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's him.
Yeah. There are a lot of them are manipulated, and they may be merged. And some of the pictures that I'm sure that I used in that video are doctored up pictures, because there's no way of knowing. The only thing I could do was say, well, this was from the 64 time frame, 65, 66.
What about going to the movies like A Hard Day's Night or Help?
Oh, I did
Can they
screenshots.
manipulate those too? Or is that the actual, like if you take a still from A Hard Day's Night, is that an unaltered picture of Paul McCartney today, or do they manipulate those too?
I don't know, but that's what I did. I would use my phone and put on the video. That's how we got the silhouette to the book, because that's a screenshot I did from another And I Love Her from Hard Day's Night. So it should be Paul, but who knows if it's manipulated. But I think it's pretty close, because it's Paul. Paul had a shorter nose from here to here, and
it was rounder at the tip too.
His tip was, rounder here. So Billy's is down.
Yeah, his nose is getting narrower and narrower as he gets older too.
Yeah.
Which is
Paul's was wider. Paul's was broader and shorter. Billy's was narrow and long. But it also was proportionate to his head was bigger.
Kim, I'm sorry, I don't have a life. This is what I do on the weekends and at night. I get pictures of people's noses.
None of us have a life. We have
One
life
more
of a
question for you.
researcher.
And do you think that the government is still out there manipulating this stuff so that it doesn't show up online, so that nobody talks?
Yes.
So
I
still keep
do.
all this secret all these years.
Yep.
It's being suppressed. We go, like I said, when I first started this and I got serious in 2013, I could go on the internet and there was just so much material out there, that I could take
She
copies of.
sourced it.
And I made prints of them. I made hard copies of what was out there on the internet. And now I go back and it's all gone. All that information has disappeared. I can't go back and use those for references, and try to find a replacement reference is really hard to do also.
Yeah.
So some of the
That's
stuff that I found, 10 years ago, I can't find on the internet anymore. It's just disappeared. So there is suppression, I think. There is a lot
Some of those references we have to leave up with the retrieval date as what it was, because we can't find something comparable to replace it with.
Yeah, I'm trying to find Mark David Chapman's police report when he was arrested in 1980. And I can't find that anywhere on the internet. But 10 years ago, it was like right there.
Yeah, because that's what we have a copy. We have copies of things that are in the book. So they were there at one time. There's just no source to it now. But it's not like we created. We didn't create that. It's the actual information, his death certificate and whatnot.
Yeah.
And
You think
another,
John was cremated so fast to cover up some stuff? Versus, I mean, because the stuff that's coming out now is totally contradictory to what the police report said back then. I mean, Kim and I were talking about that too. I mean, I don't believe for a second that Mark David Chapman was the lone gunman.
No.
If he even hit
He
John
was
Lennon
another
at
Lee
all.
Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, just the layout of the Dakota, like you were talking about earlier with the vestibule, and how the pictures come out with the bullet holes in the glass and everything. How do you stand there and shoot up? And you know, we'll get into another magic bullet theory here again, but
And he had a 5-chamber gun.
and there were more than 5 I don't want to say bullet holes, I guess. But then they made that argument, well, that's because they're entrance and exit wounds. But then that doesn't account for the holes in the glass door and everything else.
Yeah, and that would also mean that he had 5 hits.
But
And 5 were two of the 5 were through and through whatever you
through,
say,
yeah.
through and through. So yeah, that's
why I'm looking forward to John's movie coming out. So get his take on it. This is another question to clarify something for you, Kim. Late 66, you guys were talking about EMI destroyed the original Beatles master tapes for the Beatles.
Mhm.
So my question to you is today, when we listen to one of these help, please me, you name a song. I mean, I saw her standing there, one of my favorites. We'll use that one. Is that the original Paul McCartney singing it, or has Billy gone in over the years and either overdubbed to make it blend them, or is it Billy singing and we can't find Paul McCartney's original recordings anywhere anymore?
I think what it is a remastered of a remastered of a remastered of a remastered of a remastered tape.
How do you
Gotcha.
know Detroit?
they've been remastered so many times. It's crazy.
And why are they
We
doing
know
that?
they were destroyed because they said so.
Okay.
Yeah.
They were trying to say, oh, we needed space. You don't record over the Beatles when you're having Beatlemania and whatever.
Yeah.
Go buy more tape.
And they were
dive into-
also
dive
going
into
from mono
EMI,
to
Kim.
stereo.
EMI is a lot more than just a record company.
Yeah.
A lot
right.
more. They get into the intent. They're involved in British intelligence and everything too. So there's a whole rabbit hole you can dive down with EMI tied in all this stuff too.
Yeah.
They had a contract with the British military during World War II to do all their sonic technologies. So they had, they were a government contractor. So, yeah.
Yeah.
They have a history.
John
And
even
the
I was
head,
gonna say, John even said back when they remastered one of the albums or whatever, and he hated it. He said, I wish I would have known they were doing that, because I wouldn't have let them do it. You know, they took a mono record and made it stereo, and he hated it. I don't know what the word to use for that, but he
Well,
was
Yeah.
highly upset.
was it the 80 Playboy interviews, or I'm trying to place where in history John said this, that he wanted to go in and re-record every Beatles song ever recorded because he was not happy with them. Was that
Yeah.
because of the manipulation that
interview.
EMI did after the fact, or was it because John, well, he was never
Well,
happy with the way he sounded recorded? But I'm just wondering if this played in anything with
Well, I
the
think it
PID.
did.
yeah, I think it did.
He wasn't happy like with their remastering.
I think that's why he wanted to re-record everything. It was to make it better, sound better than
Or
what
go
they
back
were
to the way
doing
it
to their
originally
songs. Basically, they were destroying their songs.
They were erasing Paul. Let's face it.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. That's what I was wondering. Is that what he was upset about? Is, you know, they were
So
rewriting history and taking Paul completely out of it in his mind.
Kim, are you aware of the Dr. Truby and his analysis?
No, I don't know that name.
He what was his title?
Professor. He was-
Well, yeah, professor down in Florida. Who
He was the
did,
guy, the vocal guy, right? Did the vocal
did
comparison.
the vocals.
Yeah.
So he did voice prints. He did Yesterday, Penny Lane, and Hey Jude.
I did see the comparison. I just didn't remember the guy's name. I did-
Yeah. So
yeah.
those three, none of those were the same. Yesterday was Paul. Penny Lane was Paul and Billy combined because Paul had started that Penny Lane back in
65.
65.
Yeah,
Compilation.
you started that in 65.
So there's demo tapes of his stuff all over the place. So they used that. And then Billy is Hey Jude. Their voice prints don't match. And I've actually done voice comparisons on my computer where I have Paul singing this, We Can Work It Out was one of them. And then Billy singing We Can Work It Out. And he changes things up. He changes the key. I know you probably can do that with age, but it's your song. You wrote it. Yeah. It's not like you're
Yeah,
trying to do somebody else's.
Right. You do change keys with your voice though as you age.
I
Yeah.
was changing the
But
keys
this
to make
was
it
early.
sound
This
more
wasn't
like
as
the
an old
original.
person now. This was early on, you know.
Yeah.
He changed things up. So you don't lose that in 10, 15, 20 years. Not below 40 and 40, you know, that age. Below 50 even.
And again, Kim, this is in some parts of Europe and other countries. These are like DNA and fingerprints. They're evidenced in
They're
trials that it's facts. It's not an opinion. So
Yeah.
take that as you will. I know.
There was somebody else that did a voice print. I don't remember who it was. I think I posted it in our group a while back. That was another person that did voice prints. Victor, your camera hit your button again.
I'm just so good looking. I'm burning the camera lens up. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so those are actual, like he's saying, those are truths that you can't circumvent. Same thing with the fingerprints. You know, the fingerprints didn't match in Japan in 1980.
And now I've not seen that. See, if you look it up now, you can't find that.
Well, you're not gonna find it. And there again, like I said, we got that first person from Denny Lane, somebody that we know, that he was contacted by Billy from jail to get in touch with British intelligence to get him out of there.
I heard it was MI5 that actually intervened and got him out. That
Yeah.
the Japanese authorities were totally embarrassed by this whole thing and just wanted it to go away.
And you know, the whole thing started probably as a result of Yoko.
That I just read that recently.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe-
yeah, she's vindictive enough that she could have turned him in because
She turned him in, said
Kim, you
check
dropped.
his luggage, and he got his luggage checked, and then they didn't know what to do. And then when his fingerprints didn't match, then they were really at a loss as to what to do.
Yeah.
But then there was the marriage license you were questioning, Kim. Remember that friend of Linda's that co-authored the book with her sent a
J.
note.
Marks.
What is it?
J. Marks.
Then yeah, sent a note on their wedding day. Congratulations, whoever you are, because they knew it wasn't Paul.
Yeah, she knew it wasn't Paul back before she even met him.
I've heard people talking about, again, can't say it's fact because no, I wasn't there, but people at the Sgt. Pepper release party talking there that that wasn't Paul
Yes.
McCartney, that it was already known in the music circles what happened, that people were talking about. That's not Paul McCartney.
See,
But
again,
that's what
that's in our
rumors
book, and that's why we wrote it that way.
But so all those people knew, but yet nobody would say.
Well, look at the trail of bodies from 66, 67, right up to the late 70s of anybody that even thought about talking about this is turned up dead.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it would scare me into silence.
You have a chapter on that as well in the nonfiction book, all the deaths.
You can't talk about government secrets, period, over there.
And Kim, I've told you before, I firmly believe that it was the same cobble of people that were behind Paul McCartney's assassination that killed John Lennon. I mean, they were behind George Harrison stabbing that night. I mean, you don't break into a house as well armed, guarded, or security wise as George Harrison's to get in there and stab him 20 some times
40.
without, was it that many? Without having a little bit of help getting in there. And I think John Lennon was killed because he was going to come out with the truth. I think George Harrison was at the end. He had cancer, brain cancer, and I think he was thinking about coming out with the truth before he'd passed. And then, like I said, then go do the research of the periphery of the Beatles circle. You know, get into the Brian Jones and the other people that, I mean, hate to bring it up, the 27 Club might play something into that too. All the musicians over the years. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, Bonzo from
Morrison,
Led Zeppelin.
Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
lots of them. Mama Cass,
Bobby
Right up
Fuller.
to Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain. Yeah, Ann can tell you all about some of these because we're putting them in the book series as we get
River
into these
Phoenix.
years. River Phoenix.
Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read that somewhere too recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are all people that did not want to play well with the establishment, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
when they couldn't, the
Well,
establishment had enough, they got rid of them.
If you want to even get into it, just playing well with the establishment, and then you look at Anthony Bourdain and some of these other ones that supposedly committed suicide. They weren't suicides.
Oh, I mean,
None of these
you
were
mean,
suicides.
you mean the cameras in the
That
jail
died
cell
that were
don't magically
suicides back
turn
then.
off and you don't hang yourself from with a, you know, you tell me that's a
With a
conspiracy?
paper, whatever that was,
Yeah.
a paper
It's hard
sheet.
Find information on Epi because when you Google it, it comes up with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah,
Brian Epstein
very
is no angel.
Epstein and Epstein is very. I get tongue twisted these days now.
Yeah.
At best, Brian Epstein was complicit in Paul's death. At worst, he was an active participant, in my opinion.
Yeah, and didn't you at one time have information on Brian's death that's really not out there, like autopsy or was that something you had?
No, not on Brian. No.
Who had the information that was like he wasn't alone, that he was forcibly, you know?
I read that story somewhere. There was just stuff I found.
I was gonna say, is that something I read somewhere, or I don't know.
It was always weird that his
But
doctor was right outside that door, though, and wouldn't let anybody in until the ME examiners showed up, and then they kicked the door in. I mean, there was a lot of weird stuff going on.
There was a lot of weird stuff with that, and his body was found in one place, and the way his body was found, I think, was interesting. I'm not going to say more. I don't think.
I don't know if I'm
And his
making.
bed and everything set up away. I think it was all staged.
Yeah, because I read something, and I don't know if I'm making this up, confusing two different stories in my mind. So take this with a giant grain of salt. But I seem to remember somewhere somebody pointing out that Brian was a pill popper, but there was they found an injection site on him somewhere that you normally wouldn't inject yourself with drugs, and that it was just covered up. No one made any hay about it at the time, and they just ruled it as quick suicide. But I may be wrong on that again, because there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I keep thinking that's popping into my head.
And
Yeah, it
what,
was-
did anybody find a marriage license for Linda? Like who it says on there that she married?
Oh, it's gonna say Paul.
Yeah, legally, he was Paul McCartney.
Yeah,
I thought
they changed his documents and everything. They're not. He inherited, gained everything. So
I
But
mean, look,
Linda did know he wasn't Paul when she married him, and I do believe that.
You
Yeah,
think
that's like I said,
no?
she said she was
Yeah.
going to go set her sights on him before she even went and saw him. met
that's
him.
what she told Jay Marks,
Yeah,
that she was going to marry a Beatle.
whoever he was.
He was the last one.
Yeah.
So she knew about that rumor. She was in New York City as a photographer, and she was very well known, excellent photographer in the rock world there. So British bands were coming over. This is how the rumor started here in the United States. It started here. The rumor came to us. We did not start the rumor.
Right.
That just
To clarify what Billy says, yeah.
right. So the rock bands, they were coming over from London to New York City, and her being a photographer, she would go and take pictures and stuff. So she was meeting up with all these big rock bands, and they're the ones that said that Paul died in a car accident. That's how she found out about it. And then she went to Jay Marks because those two were writing a book together, Rock and Other Four-Letter Words. And she told Jay Marks that she was going to marry a Beatle, and she wanted to go to London to find out if this rumor was true. So Jay took her to London, and she met Billy, the replacement, and then she was invited to the Sgt. Pepper party launch in May of '67. So they got to hang out and get to know each other. So yeah, she knew. She knew. The rumor was there. So
A lot of people knew about it. They just didn't talk about it because, like I said,
They weren't allowed.
that's what would be the purpose of taking Paul out and covering it up to the point where no one knows about it. Because I'm sure you're going to use this as an example. Like, you stay in line, the rest of the British invasion bands, or look what we did if we could do this to Paul, we could do it to anybody. So yeah.
right.
And plus, there's a plethora of other bands that wrote songs about it, dropping clues that no one put two and two. I don't know if I believe this because I don't know the lyrics, but I just read somebody posted on there that Simon and Garfunkel's Mrs. Robinson was about Paul's death. That I don't know the song well enough in my head without having to go read the lyrics to find it, but I mean, I just read that. I'm like, okay.
I'll have to go through and read those. I've heard that there's other songs that we didn't even think of that were. I just heard about one of Donovan's Epiphany for Pity.
I don't know. I ain't really Donovan other than Mellow Yellow.
Yeah, well,
But,
I'll put it in there.
which was a Paul Donovan Billy combination.
I think I said it before, but the last one that I'd never put two and two together and I heard was a PID Clue song was Won't Be Fooled Again by The Who. I got, go read the lyrics on that one. I don't know if it's
The
true or
lyrics
not.
on that one are very much aligned, but the song was written. Now the thing is, Paul was having trouble. We think he was being beaten up at different times. He was being warned to get in line. That's our impression from stuff. Whether or not that song was written knowing he was having those dreams and the different things that were going on, because that song came out before.
Did it?
It came out in February. I'm not sure if it was February of '66 or it might have been it was earlier. You go look at the release date, because I said the same thing. That song lines up so much, but it could have been talking about the subject, but with a different angle to it.
And the other one that I've heard it from numerous places, and I did check the release date. It did come out in early '67 because I thought it came out earlier than that. And I can see reading into it maybe a little bit, but Ruby Tuesday by the Rolling Stones is another one. But you really got to look. If Mick Jagger and Keith Richards did write that, is it they did it in
memory.
eloquently, because I can read the lyrics. So, I can see where this could refer to Paul, but at the same time, it could be just a straight up love song. Who knows?
But that was the point of a lot of those songs. They're dualistic.
True.
And a lot of Billy songs are that way.
Well, again, Billy's got a lot of songs out there where I think he's directly singing about Paul's death.
Yeah, Band on the Run.
Along the winding road. I've told Kim before, I believe wholeheartedly that song is about the night Paul died.
Yep.
And
Why do you guys think he was being beaten?
To get in line. I think things are orchestrated.
Led you to believe that
well, there's pictures out there of him. Let's just say where it looks like he took a beating. Now, the famous one I think I've read that he had Mike take it.
The moped.
I don't know if it's true or not.
He had Mike take the picture after supposedly the moped accident, but
yeah.
Yeah. But there's two other photographs.
I'm sorry, what?
There's two other photographs of him with a black eye. One is from 1964. We don't know why. And one is from 1966. And that was when he was in India. They just escaped Manila. And they spent a couple days in India to rest. But it was there that he got beat up.
Yeah.
Is that the one where he had the big gash over his eye? The pictures where he's looking up?
No.
That's the supposed moped accident.
Yeah, I don't think that was the moped accident. That's the one
that was a beating.
Yeah.
If you're going to face plant your head, if you're going to land on your face off of a moped, say you're falling forward or whatever, and you're going on your face, whatever, you have a gash in your eyebrow and a gash in your lip and you chipped a tooth. What happened to the rest of the face in between?
Right. There was nothing
there. Should be brush burns on your cheeks and other things. That, to me, that was an uppercut to the eye. And
he was going 30, he said, on that moped.
I'm sorry, 30 miles an hour, you're going to face plant the road. You're going to have some road rash on your cheek. Yeah.
You're going to have some broken bones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did those mopeds go that fast? I don't know. Well, anyway.
I don't know if it was kilometers or.
Well, that's true. But
I don't know what that is and how fast that would be. And
that whole story was made up. There was no full, just so you know, Kim, there was no full moon on the December 26th. The full moon occurred like 2 to 3 weeks earlier, around the 8th of December, 10th. So just, yeah, that's all.
That was in December 65, right? This is when this supposedly happened.
Yes.
Yes. And then there's a couple of things also that happened around that time that's kind of suspicious too. Like there was a fire at his house a week before Christmas of 65. Then he had the moped accident, and then wasn't his car stolen, if I remember right? Right after that, somebody stole his car.
Yeah, there was something that happened in the spring too. And when did they go to Tunisia?
Paul went to Tunisia in February 65.
So there's that.
Yeah. So yeah, there are a couple pictures out there with him with a black eye. And as we know from the India, they escaped Manila. And according to reports and what they said was Marcos sent some thugs after them. Well, they went after Paul.
Specifically?
He's the one with the black eye. He's the one that got beat up.
Yeah.
So,
Neil and Mal were trying to shield them as best they could.
Yeah.
But you can't shield that many people.
Yeah, but Mel took a beating trying to protect them.
Yeah,
So,
ribs.
yeah, it was very dangerous. That whole 66 tour was just a disaster for them. When they
Paul
went
was getting electric shocks through his microphone.
Yeah. And actually, in one of the magazines that I have, Paul talked about, I think this was about 65 during that tour, where he said that he was up on stage playing and this guy came up to him, got on stage, took out a knife, and threatened him. Said, and unplugged his amp and threatened to kill him.
Yeah.
It-
And they don't show that. I mean, all those things that were videoed, that one where the guy jumped on stage and got in John's face, he just wanted to shake John's hand. We see videos of that, but we don't see the ones of this guy with Paul.
Mhm. But if you look at the 66, some of their concert videos, you can see, especially if you go to one in Japan, you can see that Paul's getting some kind of shock through his mic. And it seemed to me like he was the one being targeted.
Do you happen to remember what song that was? I'm gonna go check it out. 'Cause I've seen the footage of it at the Budokan. I'm assuming that's the one you're talking about.
Mhm.
And now that you brought it up, I'd like to go back and check it out, but I don't really want to sit through the whole thing. 'Cause I've seen it so many
The
times.
Budokan one too, and there was something, other things going on with that, and they were basically held captive in the hotel.
Well, it's because the Japanese were irate that the Beatles were performing at the Budokan. They were the first
Yeah.
rock band to perform there. It was
Sacred ground.
spiritually- Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know there was the popular, somebody in Japan at least were quite irritated by that, and they were getting threats about that.
Yeah. But meanwhile, the 60,000 people showed up.
Yeah, right?
But they finally let them play because they were dignitaries. They were, because they had their MBEs. So they were looked upon as being dignitaries, and so it was okay for them to play there now.
I think that was the worst thing that ever happened to those four men, is accepting that medal.
And that's what John says too. Getting those MBEs.
Reading after seeing you guys' videos and reading about it, and that was. But here's the thing: did they have the freedom of choice to turn them down? Really? Yeah, if they would have said no,
And that was all manipulated.
somebody would have signed up. Oh, we'll be there
Do you remember why that was manipulated, Victor?
for the
Do you
MBEs.
understand the story of the MBEs?
Only what I've learned from you guys is about that, because there's not much out there that's other than it was very unusual at the time for a musician to get those MBEs.
Never.
And I think the Beatles were the first. It was reserved for people that did high service for the crown or something.
And they
something
came
like that.
from aristocratic families, not working class.
Right. Because I remember then reading about the huge backlash, people wanting to send them back. What are these guys? Well, if it's what you guys say it is, now I know why. But
Yeah.
So in receiving their medals, that's when they entered into a secret society. And which one, there's too many to pick from, But that's when they entered. And I think that's when they found out a lot of how the world works. And they started speaking out in their own way. And I think that's what the Butcher album was about, too. They were reporting what they were seeing and what they were aware of that was going on.
that would explain more, in my mind, the backlash on that album cover and having it called so fast than what I always thought. I don't get it. It's a couple rack of ribs and some decapitated baby dolls. I mean, there were worse than that out there at the time.
Sausage links or something.
Yeah, I mean, for that recall to happen, the money that EMI ate on that, I always questioned there had to be more than that. Okay, I've never really looked at that album cover with anything related to PID before.
It's SRA.
What's SRA?
The satanic ritual satanic ritual sacrifice stuff, information.
So they were letting secrets out that they shouldn't have.
They also did the what do you want to call it? The Christmas message that came out that year.
Yeah.
And Paul made the statement of, seeing a baby sliced isn't very pretty sight, folks, So
I didn't hear that either. I'm going to go find that now.
he
I'll send it to you.
he was they knew, because that was after the MBE thing. They then knew what was going on. You know, the Hunger Games, all these movies that came out have been out in the last 20, 30 years are all truths or predictives, because it's predictives of what's happening because they already know about it.
And we're just finding out this information now, how widespread this SRA is. And that's one of the things we wanted to do with our books, was to expose these stories of these survivors that are brave enough to come out and tell us their stories.
Right.
Yeah.
And it should be listened to. And this stuff is, in my opinion, it's got to stop. I really dislike trafficking, and this SRA is just horrible what these people witness.
Yeah.
So when we wrote about, you know, that scene where Paul got caught and what they did to that child, it was based on a true story.
Really?
What happened to that child?
It wasn't Paul there though, was it?
No,
It
no.
was- okay.
No. In
No.
order to tell these
Tell the
stories,
story.
you know, how do you tell the story in this? So there's no way in my mind that he would have wanted to willingly be involved in any of this. I think it's stuff that he saw, what they saw, and was against, because they were against, you know, war, murder, all that. They couldn't stomach. No violence.
After children.
Yeah, and he loved children. So how do you tell the story? Well, you have to create a fictional story that, you know, he was trying to save these children, which in my mind, I think he would have wanted to do. But this is what goes on in those secret societies. And I think it's some of the stuff that he saw. And he
Well, you
was,
can't question it, because I mean, yeah, you presented it as fiction in your book, but it's all over the news and TV today. All the stuff coming out as facts. I mean, here with Jeffrey Epstein and the plane rides, and I mean, like I said, Jimmy Savile in Britain back in
And
the
I've even
60s.
been hearing there's people out there that is worse than Jeffrey.
I
And it
would
still
not
hasn't come
surprise me.
out.
Wouldn't be
So,
surprised.
yeah. And I think a lot of this stuff came out, like a lot of people are talking now in the UK about the hunting of the children and stuff. And I'm not sure if it's all because Philip is now gone, or people that are now gone that they're talking more. But the people that these are actual people that were there being abused.
No, I knew
It's
Prince
terrible.
Philip was, let's just say, implicated in some of this stuff. But
Yes.
are you, again, I just don't know how to come out and ask it.
Watch how we say it.
Yeah. Was he an active participant in, let's just say, these hunts?
who's that?
I think so.
Who?
Philip.
Prince Philip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm just trying to, yeah.
And his wife.
Yeah. Oh, well, and look at cantaloupes.
Yep.
Who?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, I was talking about stuff that was even after that in England, but yeah,
In
cantaloupes.
64. Yep, that story in 64.
Lizzie was there too, so that's not, yeah.
In Canada.
Well, I've got my
It's in the
opinion
book.
about
People just
a
have
family that's prominent in American politics here that, without naming names, maybe worse than Jeffrey Epstein. I'm sure, I won't name a name, but I'm sure we're thinking of the same family.
Yeah.
Oh, there's several of them.
Mm-hmm. There is.
But it's,
I hate to
No, it's
short, but I'm gonna need to. I got another appointment.
Oh,
all
that's
right. We're now at the 2-hour mark, so
yes, we
We
are.
gotta wrap it up.
we're getting long-winded, because we can always do this again. And if
Yeah.
anybody's managed to last this long through the video, you know, I forget to tell people they can always start and stop it and pick it back up.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
watch 7.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
when you're done, call me because I'm gonna get your opinion on that. Would you please?
Yes, I will.
And
We
I'll send you
appreciate
the
you
link for
having
Ivan
me.
Buffoni.
Well, I
What's that,
appreciate
Ann?
you inviting me, and I look forward to watching more of the videos, and I can't wait for the nonfiction to come out.
Yeah, well, we're
Thank you.
diligently working on it. So,
Thank you for your support. We
Yes.
appreciate it very much.
You guys have a great day.
thanks,
You
you
too.
too.
Thank you.
Love you, Annie.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.